Thanks Matt, and croeso pawb. Diolch am ymuno gyda ni heddiw. Thank you for joining us on our third Different Futures Wales Ddyfodol Gwahanol Cymru event. This is part of a series of 6 sessions where we're bringing together organisations from across the voluntary sector and beyond to discuss the implications of COVID-19 now and for the future. We aren't able to do a bilingual session on Teams today, but please do continue to contribute in Welsh around the session if you'd like to. As well as these conversations, we've been sending out a survey on each topic, and there's also a general survey linked to this that we hope you'll fill in. We are going to be pulling all of this information together into reports on each session and a final report on what's come out of the work overall that we will be sharing with Welsh Government, funders and others who are interested, including yourselves. We'll also have a blog out early next week from thanks to Jess Blair, who's joining us today, and we'd like to keep the conversation going on hashtag Different Futures Wales and hashtag Ddyfodol Gwahanol Cymru. And you can always also email the policy team at policy@wcva.cymru. And we'll introduce the next session at the end of this. But thank you very much for joining us and look forward to the session. And I'd like to introduce now our WCVA trustee, Helen White, who is also the Chief Executive Officer of TAF Housing. And I'm delighted that she's agreed to join us today to chair this session. So over to you, Helen. Helen is...
Well, that was a good start, wasn't it? I'll unmute myself. Apologies, everybody. Diolch am y croeso, Anna. Thank you for the welcome. I'm really pleased to be chairing this session today. Hopefully that's my my glitch over for not unmuting, but you know, we're all getting used to these new ways of working. So for the last 10 weeks, I, like many of you, have been working in these unprecedented times, dealing with delivering services around a pandemic, and that has been hugely challenging. One thing I found incredibly helpful is being able to connect with others working for me in the housing sector, but also in the voluntary sector, and sharing of information and ideas, challenges, worries, anxieties has been hugely helpful. So I'm really pleased that the WCVA are putting these sessions on to help us share, and I think this particular session I think is really interesting because there is a real focus on looking to the future. So I am going to try my best to chair it with some kind of order. As Anna said, use the chat if you do want to come in. But as you know, the starting point was the 4 questions that were circulated before the session, and the first one of those being around what has been the biggest impact on your organisation. Does anybody particularly want to start with telling us some of that about what has been the biggest impact and what they've learned and what they'll be using to help shape the future? Let's have a look. I think for me, obviously, it was the fact that on the 22nd of March, we had to send everybody home and they were unable to be back in the office. We've had to work completely remotely, and that's presented significant challenges to us. But I'm really pleased that everyone has really risen to the occasion. So I don't know if anyone wants to come in at this point. You can raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I think we will see that you're keen to make a contribution. Okay, Jackie, you've mentioned there that working remotely is difficult if you're delivering services. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? You're very welcome to come on to the call.
Okay, so Jackie from CAVS, I work with a number of organisations that are delivering services, and work with a lot of volunteers, which proved quite difficult for them right at the beginning. With volunteers having to be shielded, and how they would address delivering their services. So working with different organisations, working with probation service, so having people coming in from different organisations and assisting them to be able to deliver the services for those people who are shielding, and for the older generation, those people who are self-isolating, for example. I think that puts an awful lot of pressure onto that particular organisation. So, supporting them in every way that we can. But, the difficulties that arise when you're working remotely and not actually working in an office with your colleagues, that you can gather everybody together. So, and I know that there are lots of different organisations out there, like carers, for example, where they're working with the Carers Trust and working with the carers who are working, obviously, to work with those people who are unwell in different ways, shapes and forms. So it's just adjusting, and now obviously potentially coming back into a recovery, potentially, is like, how do we manage that? I think that's the thing for me, is like what we're doing right now is that recovery. So just hard for people to go into one thing, come out, and then potentially we could be locked down again, in a couple of months' time. So things won't be different, but they will be different. So it's just how is best for us as CVCs, potentially, to support organisations that are actually delivering services. I think I've gone round that a long way round, Helen.
No,
Sorry.
I think that's really helpful as way of an introduction, because it has fundamentally made us rethink how we are going to deliver services in the future. And you're right, as CVCs, there's a real key role there to support, from an infrastructure point of view, to support the sector to have the space to think about how they're going to deliver in a new way, because it's in some ways, I don't know about others, I found going into lockdown a lot easier than I think coming out is going to be. Because we had no choice. It was almost like the sticky plaster, wasn't it? We kind of ripped off the sticking plaster and that was it. We had to just change overnight, and we came up with some really innovative and quite exciting ways, really, of service delivery.
Helen,
yes,
go on next, and then Ross, Evans, Sid and Malcolm, and there's Ruth and four others. So there's a number that are wanting to come in on this point.
Okay, yeah. So sorry, who's the first person that wanted to come in on this point? Was it
Janet?
Janet. Okay, Janet. Yeah.
And I think there was Ross Evans. So Janet, do you want to come in now? Janet, you're on screen now.
Just need to unmute, Janet.
Yes, unmute, Janet.
Okay, we're having a bit of trouble with Janet. What about Ross? Ross Evans, do you want to come in?
Janet, we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Back to Janet, yeah.
Morning, everybody. Just as others are saying, I'm with the Stroke Association, and we're normally delivering services out in the community, picking up referrals when stroke survivors are discharged from hospital back into the community. And like others, we've very early back in March moved to home working for all our direct delivery team, which has meant we have the challenge of delivering that support via phone or via Zoom or via Skype or Teams in some circumstances. But also it has allowed us to look at the way we work, and we've really had the positive impact of individuals who we thought might not want to access services online in the past and now really taking that on board. And it's actually opened up some doors for us where normally our coordinating teams are working in set areas. We can open up our support, and where we may have only had one person in an area and delivering support was difficult because it's online, there's really no boundaries to the geography anymore at the moment. So there are some positives that have come out of the situation as well. So yeah, so some good and some bad, I guess. In just the future, obviously there's a lot of uncertainties, PPE and the various other things about how we get back out into the community. So we're working with the health boards on that at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. I think that's that absolutely makes sense, particularly around realising that this does change the geographical boundaries that we might be used to working with, that they no longer exist in the same way, and that people, and I'm really pleased to hear that people are prepared to think differently about how they receive some of the services. So that's a real positive. And as awful and as terrible as the situation has been and continues to be, you know, there are opportunities here. So I think it's really good to try and focus on some of the positives. Robert Callow, you had your hand up. Just need to unmute yourself, and then the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's just I suppose it's an observation and a bit of a question for everyone, really, and it's back to the question about the changes to services that everyone's had to do. And I work for health, but I think this applies to everyone, really. So in health or local authorities or housing or wherever, everyone's had to do some rapid service changes, be that more flexible working, teleconferencing, whatever, or stopping stuff. But I suppose my question is, because of the nature and the need to do this, we've not really engaged our service users on this, and we've just done them. And I suppose my observation is that we don't want to use COVID-19 as the excuse to implement service changes and we can't engage with people properly now because we can't do face-to-face or whatever. And it's really sort of that question about, how do we ensure that the changes that we do make, that we bring along people with us and we engage with them to make sure that those services are the best we can make, and sort of, you know, because it's easy to talk about all these things and sort of forget that in most service changes you would do quite a lot of engagement with people about the impacts of those or the improvements that you want to make.
Yeah, thanks Rob. I think there's been so much talk over recent years about the importance of co-production of what we do, and you're right. I think it's a really good challenge to say, well, okay, has this been a bit of a, I don't know, is it circumventing co-production, and are we going to regret that? Does anyone want to come back on that point? I can only, just for you to know, I would hate for you to think I'm being unfair. I can only see one person's name with a hand up. So
Helen, there's quite a number of people. So if we don't get round to it, because we've only got a short space of time today, if you want to put it in the chat box, but in a specific order, I've got Sid. I don't know whether Sid wants to contribute, but Fran is also asking, has anybody had good experience of really good approaches to digital excluded people? So I don't know if anybody wants to come in on that. And then we've had Robert, but there's also Debbie Johnson, Joe Whitfield, Samantha Anderson, and Alison Price. Apologies if I've forgotten anybody, because there are quite a number of hands up. And Steph Walsh has come in on a few comments about yoga sessions have been very popular, but also it's very difficult for people who don't understand the internet and understand technology.
Yeah, and I think that seems to be a theme. I can see the chat. There definitely seems to be a theme around digital exclusion.
Yes.
And I don't know, Sid, was that what you were coming in on? Or?
Helen, before the next person comes in, just a reminder to everybody: if you could mute and turn your videos off, please, when you're not speaking. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. So yeah, if you just can, that helps, I think, with the recording. So Sid, I think I've got you down as wanting to come in.
As a representative of Untitled County Borough Council, I have to say that the response to the lockdown from a council's perspective was absolute and immediate. What we have found is a real willingness from our third sector partners and registered social landlords and other organisations to now work in partnership. And I think the absolute gift was that some of the sharing information protocols were relaxed slightly, and it's allowed us to provide help and support to people who ordinarily wouldn't be able to get through that kind of mire and those arrangements, and on a national basis. That's been a really welcome development. I think in terms of that digital inclusion rather than exclusion, and we do have digital whales to rely on and to go to if we need anything for anyone. The issue for me is all around that protecting the actual equipment and how we get the equipment in and out, because it's got to be isolated for 72 hours, like in the same way that books have, and that's certainly creating some issues for us to deal with on a practical level. I do think genuinely that these platforms have been a really great experience for most of the partners that we work with, but there'll be individuals within that who aren't having such a great experience, and there's an absolute acknowledgement that we need to have more robust systems in place that also include our digital response. And I guess apart from that, I'm really content to sit and listen to other people at this point, because I think I've got very much to learn from some of the other experiences of the other partners in the group. And I'd just like to say thanks very much for putting it on.
Thank you. I totally agree. I think that it's the time to be sharing information, isn't it? Time to be sharing ideas. You know, some of us will have tried things that will have failed miserably, and then we can share those. And some of the people will try things that have worked and great, that we can all learn from those. Alison Price, I think you wanted to come in. I don't. If you're
Hello.
Still... Oh, hi. Go
Hello.
on.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, I was busy writing there, and I'm sort of getting writer's cramp. Just to say that prior to COVID, we had a newsletter that went out to existing forum members. We had forum groups. We're a charity that works with older people. That newsletter reached about 100 people. We've carried on throughout COVID producing firstly a weekly newsletter. Now it's gone to 2 weekly, and circulation now stands at 1,500 plus. And we give people the opportunity to contribute their stories in lockdown and COVID chronicles, and as well as very useful local information, because a lot of older people were finding the amount of information totally overfacing. So although we are producing the newsletter, we're getting contributions from people, and we're also encouraging people to be ambassadors. They're getting other people to sign up for the newsletter and to contribute and to distribute. So it's giving people still a chance to be independent and have some control on the sort of information that is circulated to their age group, if you like. So we found that very successful, so successful that we're reaching the point we can't afford to do it. So we're trying to secure some funding for that. But it's just an opportunity to carry on co-producing, but in a different way. It probably wouldn't have happened without COVID.
Yeah, again, and it's something, it's about trying to find some of the positives out of what has been an incredibly challenging time. And there's lots of very positive comments about the COVID chronicles. I think that sounds like an idea that lots of people are interested in. So I think Debbie.
Sorry, Helen.
Yes, Sally.
Sorry, just to interrupt. Claire Swales has posted something particularly around community connectors, so it'd be good to find out from her a little bit more about how they've had to adapt their service to meet the needs of people in Powys, and then maybe we can come back to. I think we need to bring in Jo, and then I know Samantha has put her hand up.
Okay, so sorry, who was it from Community Connectors? I've missed that one. Is that
Claire Swales? Claire,
go on then, Claire. Do you want to come in?
Hi, Claire Swales here, Head of Health and Wellbeing at PAVO, but the Community Connectors team sit within my team. So we work very closely with health and social care. We have 13 Community Connectors across Powys, and pre-COVID times we would receive around 220 referrals a month into our service, and that would be through self-referrals or through referrals from GPs, so around the social prescribing model, or from social workers. And we have a member of staff based within the adult social services entry point then in the council. But it was quite extraordinary. Very, very quickly, when things started to move, we had a meeting with the council, and they were adamant that the use of the voluntary sector was vital in their work then, really, around COVID-19. And what transpired from that was we had to quickly redeploy the development team staff here at PAVO across to the Connectors team, so effectively doubling our capacity, and also redeploy a number of the council's library staff into our service to cope with the demand. So in April alone, as I said, we normally get that around 220. We had 1,632 referrals into our service. We extended that from a Monday to Friday service to a 7-day-a-week service, and did an out of hours until 10 p.m. So we had to change our systems very rapidly. Now, that was great, actually. It worked really well. The team just got on and done it. We had to train people up very quickly. But actually coming out of that now, it's still extremely busy. We've had over 1,000 referrals this month, but it's the impact on the staff and the sector. I think we're starting to see it taking its toll now on people. Not to keep delivering services at that speed for a prolonged length of time. And again, it's about reaching out to those people that wouldn't necessarily come to the services normally. So again, using that befriending service and doing that in a different way. So it's been very challenging, very rewarding, but not without its difficulties for the community and for staff.
Yeah, and I think it's that burnout, isn't it? I think we're all feeling at risk of burnout and the fatigue that has come with having to be thinking differently, working differently, and that's a real challenge, I think, for the sector to make sure that we can maintain this level of service. How confident are people that we can continue in this way in the long term? I suppose that is a real challenge.
I'm hoping that
we put in Mae next. Sorry.
Yes, I'm going to come to Mae. Apologies, Mae. I know you put your hand up really early. So Mae Baxter Thornton, I think you're going to come in next.
Hi there. Yes, I don't know if you can see me. I've just put my camera on. I've got COVID here, as everyone can see.
No, that's great. Thanks, Mae.
Yeah, I'm the Living Well with Arthritis coordinator for South Wales for Cymru versus Arthritis. And before lockdown, we were running monthly support groups across towns across South Wales. And since the lockdown, what I've done is, rather than run a group every week in different places, I've just run one virtual meeting every week that everyone can come to. So I think in some ways, the people who are attending that might even be getting more support because they're getting it weekly instead of monthly. But you're right, there is this gap of people that don't use digital. We have had some success where we had an 80-year-old from Aberdeen ringing in using the conference call and ringing in and putting the conference ID in and joining the Teams meeting by phone. So we have had, I think, maybe 4 or 5 people doing that. Another nice thing about what we've been doing is that we have had, there's this myth that arthritis just affects older people. So we've had people on the call. The youngest we've had is 21, who was diagnosed first at the age of 12. So with rheumatoid arthritis. So to have her speaking to someone from a different area who has rheumatoid arthritis, who's in their 70s, and for them to learn that it affects all ages, not just the older people, has been really quite good. I think what we've been doing is I've been ringing people as well. So for those who haven't been attending the Teams, the virtual meeting like this that we've been doing, they have been getting some support over the telephone. And I can see that there's somebody from RCT, CBC. I have referred quite a few people in Aberdeen to the support that the council was offering in terms of getting shopping picked up and collected for them, or to have their prescriptions collected for them, because they didn't know that because they were over 70 with a long-term health condition, that they were eligible for that. They were just going shopping as they've always done, and referring people into services. So that's been quite good as well. So I just wanted to share that really, because there's been some positives and some negatives.
Yeah, thanks Mae. And I think as always, as a sector, we are really trying to find the positives here, aren't we? Really trying to build on the positives. Yes, accept that there are real challenges that are making some of the service delivery incredibly difficult. But I think as a sector, we've proven before that we can be innovative, we can do things differently, but I also think there is something around making sure we do really focus on ensuring our services are inclusive. I saw a really interesting article the other day about the impact, if we are all going to be wearing face masks, the impact that may have on people with hearing impairments, because they can't actually see you speaking. And so there are some, some quite significant consequences that you don't initially think of. So inclusivity is really key. I can see a couple more hands up. Sally, do you want to give me a hand on who's next?
Yes, well, we've got Marco. I think Colin first, but I didn't know whether Patience wanted to come in to provide a sort of BME perspective. I think I might have seen her hand up, or she came on screen.
She did. Patience did put her hand up earlier. So Patience, do you want to come in first, and then we'll go to Cadwyn?
And apologies if we're missing, because there's quite a lot of hands coming up and a lot of chat. So please use the chat function if you just want to add a comment, and we can come back to you maybe a little bit later, if not via email.
Okay, thanks. So Patience, I can't hear you. So Carwyn Humphreys, do you want to come in?
Hi, Carwyn Humphreys here. I'm the Volunteer Centre Coordinator at Untitled Gwynedd. Just in general, really, you know, since the lockdown, I think it's strengthened the voluntary sector tremendously, and I think we've got to, you know, we've got to showcase that and celebrate that. What we've got to bear in mind is, of course, the demand for volunteers and where that's going to lead to in future, particularly when it comes to face-to-face services. And, you know, moving to being too digital will have its downsides, you know, especially over with mental health and face-to-face contacts, with befriending and reducing isolation. But the other thing, you know, positive thing to come out of this we need to consider, we had a very interesting keynote speaker at our AGM last year talking about the environmental impact and the changes that we can bring into, you know, working from home. The Centre for Alternative Technology was there to give us a presentation, and we were discussing things like, you know, how can businesses and organisations change the way they operate to have a positive impact on the environment. So things like flexi working digitally, etc. So that's something that we need to keep in mind as well. You know, our carbon footprint, the environmental impact of all these changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think I've seen it put, there was a meme that sort of said, you know, before we go back, let's decide what we want to go back to. And I think it would be absolutely disastrous if we didn't capture some of the momentum and progress we've made on environmental issues. I mean, you only have to look up into the sky. There's not many contrails or aeroplanes to be seen. The water feels cleaner. I've been swimming in the river because I'm across the border in England, so I'm allowed to do that right now before I get in trouble. So yeah, so I have been. I've been feeling that impact of the environmental improvements, and I think it's really important. I love the phrase. I think you said there. You know, can we become too digital? And that is a risk, isn't it? You know, are we rushing towards becoming too digital? And we leaving people behind? I'm really keen on tech. I think tech's massively exciting and presents loads of opportunities to us. But I am always nervous of making sure we don't leave people behind.
Helen.
Yes.
We've got Marco next and three others.
Okay,
but there's a lot of comment coming from Steph, and maybe bringing in Judith Stone as well.
So let me just say that. So we've got Marco, Steph, and Judith. Yeah.
Judith wants to say anything, but I think we perhaps need to be moving the conversation on to thinking about the implications for the future.
Okay.
What's worked well in the current circumstances, what could continue through as we emerge out of the lockdown and the future.
Okay, great, thanks Sally, that's helpful.
I think that might be helpful as we move forward.
Great, yeah, okay. Marco, do you want to come in and just sort of bear that in mind in terms of your comments around really focusing on the future?
Yeah, I'm trying to,
yeah, you go for it.
Oh, okay, you can hear me. Yeah, it's interesting, the conversation around digital. I think people relate. What happens is people start talking about digital as if humans don't exist. But any good digital transformation is a person-first approach. So so it's not a either or. It's actually how do humans, you know, become number one in the process, and then. And the reality is that what we found is humans want to use digital because they want to communicate better, and there's a whole set of tools there. So our challenge is how do we make it human-centered, and so that people can communicate. And I think what we're all moving towards is seeing a lot of the benefits that are there. And for us as an organisation, that's our kind of our big push, is all the digital and how that works. And I think it's speeding us up. So in terms of the future, I think I can see that people, all the benefits they're starting to reap from that now. I think it will continue to the future. Don't forget humans. Humans are number one. They've got to be part of it. And also, it's not like, is it either digital or face-to-face? That's a wrong way to look at it. It's how do we connect those up is the important bit. How do those connect up? How do people find things out and then find out where they can go for what the services they want, face-to-face, etc. They're not going to, if they want to find a face-to-face service, it's very wrong to expect someone to be trudging around a city or walking down the lanes to find the service. That's not how people find things. You don't go to your bank by walking around the city trying to find a bank. You do it online. You do all those things. So it's so it's about helping you get routes to the right places, not an either-or situation.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. So it's to enable, isn't it? To enable access to services, connectivity, really about enabling people. And I love the idea of it being people first. I think sometimes we do fall into the trap of thinking tech first, people second. So I think that's a really good reminder. Steph, I think you wanted to come in. Steph Walsh, I think, is it?
Steph, do you want to add to some of the comments you've posted?
If not, we can go to Judith.
Quite happy not to. I'm fine. Just put in the comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Steph. Yeah, they'll all be recorded, so that's all part of the conversation. So, Judith, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, hi, Helen. Just really to add 3 points to what I've already put in the chat pane. So one is in terms of what has worked well, much stronger collaboration between charities within the sector, but within the organisation that I'm seconded to from WCVA, I'm at Kidney Wales, collaborating with other charities, clinicians, social workers and psychologists to work effectively together to meet the general need of populations, but also to identify the most vulnerable. That's worked really well. I guess from a fundraising point of view, what hasn't worked well and needs some serious consideration is the diversion of funding away from, I guess, predominantly health and social care charities towards the NHS, and what the implications are of that for the longer term. And in terms of going forwards, I think, Welsh Government, local government need to have a good think about where their critical relationships are with the third sector. They may have had one perception of that before COVID, and they may have a slightly altered perception post-COVID. And just some good conversations and consideration of what relationships they want to see going forwards and what kind of services they want to see sustained, because I think this whole situation has resulted in a paradigm shift for everyone, and what we had before is not what we need to work towards achieving for the future in every respect. So looking at those relationships between the public sector and the third sector.
Thanks, Judith. I think that's really helpful, and I think particularly in terms of the final question was around what will we need to do to help shape a better future, and I think that really fits with that question around what are the conversations that we need to be having with national government, so with Welsh Government, and then also how has this changed the dynamic between our more local conversations, particularly I think as we look at collaboration on a local level. So it feels like it's going to be kind of multi-layered, isn't it? It's going to be the big national conversations, but also more room for local conversations to support that delivery at a local level. So Robert, you've put your hand up. Robert, do you want to come in? And apologies if someone else has got the hand up that I haven't come to, but
there is one other, and I don't know whether Tom also wants to contribute following his post around the prioritisation of services.
Tom, anything you want to add to that? No, Tom.
Hi.
Oh,
yeah.
Hi.
No, it's just an interesting concept. I think I certainly saw the review that went out from yourselves with regards to the funding and how that's going to be reviewed with a tender. I think it was a £5,000 tender to review how funding goes out to help other charities. But certainly there is a reliance in certain sectors on charities at different levels, whether it be research or whether it be intervention, say with patients within health. And so, yeah, it's just how we capture that and where we can work with. I work with a number of charities, and we found bringing them together as a collaborative was a lot more stronger in terms of being able to approach Welsh Government in terms of changing policy, etc. So it'd be interesting to see whether you do end up with clusters. We already have that with a number of kind of very strong areas, but if there's other ones that are emerging that could help certain areas.
Yeah, I think that's again a key point in terms of influence. We're going to be able to have much greater influence if we're having joined up conversations and we're going with a clear ask. And I think that it's great if this pandemic has really facilitated lots more conversations, so that we get clear on what that ask is, so that when we are talking to ministers and others at Welsh Government, we're very clear on what we need to support the sector at this time. I think.
Can I just come in, because one of our participants has had her camera on, all the way through, and I don't think she's aware.
Is that Susan, who's also sideways?
Susan, you're on sideways. So we can't hear you. Did you want to come in and say something?
If you're very welcome to turn your video off. Not that we don't mind looking at you, it's just that you're sideways.
Excuse me, usually the meeting convener can turn off cameras and microphones for other people if you have a look. There's a little few buttons. There you go.
No, okay, yeah. Well, hopefully Susan can still hear us, but at least it's not making me crick my neck now. So thanks, Susan. Robert Callow, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come back in?
I think it was me before. I was asking the question about engagement and service changes, so I think that's been covered.
Oh, you've covered that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And Joe Whitfield. I've got Joe Whitfield down. Did you come in, Joe?
Hi. No, well, I posted in the comments. It was just really, I was just giving an overview of what we've been doing as an organisation. I work for the eating disorder charity Beat. So yeah, I've put it in the comments. I'm happy for that to be there, or if you want me to go through it, I can. It's up to you.
No, well, I think what would be, I mean, I'd be really interested, particularly in terms of demand for services. We've all heard on the news, and we all know from our own personal experiences, the implications from a mental health point of view of lockdown. So I can imagine that there has been quite a significant increase in people trying to access some of these support services, because I can imagine that the anxiety of lockdown could, quite easily exacerbate symptoms around eating disorders, around other mental health challenges. So has that been the case, Joe? Are you finding an increase in demand?
Yeah, absolutely. So since lockdown began, we've had a 50% increase in demand for our services, which is just massive. And we are a national charity, but we're quite small in the grand scale of charity. So, but we've been quite fortunate in the way that we've been able to respond to that demand. So, for example, we already delivered all of our helpline services either digitally or by phone. So the only change that we've really had to make in terms of delivery is everybody's now working from home. That came with a little bit of an increase in costs because people have had to use mobile phones and call forwarding, with the handling software that we use. But, we were already really well prepared to, in terms of offering our services, not a lot has changed. We've also been able to respond to the extra demand by moving people from elsewhere in the organisation to work on our helpline services. And we've also been able to increase our cohort of digital volunteers. So that's helped us to sort of respond to that demand. I think at the moment we're answering around about 45% of we've been able to. I can't think of how to explain the figures, but yeah, we're able to kind of respond. We've been able to respond really well. So yeah, that's been good. But then and obviously we have seen people getting in touch more. As you quite rightly mentioned, people are experiencing increased anxiety because of the lockdown, but now also because of the potential of lockdown easing. We have also been able to set up like a new online support group in addition to the other ones that we run, which we are able to keep open for the whole of the time that we have our helpline open each day. So that's been quite a nice positive change that's happened. So yeah, we've had challenges. We've still got challenges that we need to overcome. We need to now look at how we are able to deliver our training in future, and we're looking at re-engineering some of that delivery through using platforms like Zoom and Skype and so on. And then obviously we've had a drop in our income as well from things like community fundraising activities, which have pretty much all been cancelled, you know, all the major events and things. So yeah, it's just different things that we're having to sort of overcome at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting around they're not they're new challenges, aren't they? So it's having to think and be creative around dealing with some of these new challenges, and I think they exist on that level around, yeah, as you say, around supporting not only the service users or those accessing the services that are being offered, but also the staff and the volunteers who are delivering those services, because the impact of the demand, and hearing some quite, you know, traumatic stories, I'm sure, from various people who are suffering quite badly or at this time, that does put a lot of pressure on people, doesn't it? So I think we have to not only care about the mental health of who we're trying to help, but also those who are helping us help others. It's something I'm certainly finding now as we're starting to talk at TAF about the implications of the lockdown easing. I think those people who originally didn't like the idea of working from home have kind of got used to it and are now actually really nervous about being asked to come back to the office. So that it's it's funny how people's journey has changed and where they're at mentally has changed as well. I noticed John had put something in around the use of office space. Now, I know we've talked a lot about the kind of the service delivery, but in terms of the premises that we use, is that, I don't know, John, whether you want to come in on that, or whether anyone else feels, is this going to fundamentally change how we, where we deliver our services from, and how resilient are we as a sector to be fleet of foot in that matter? You know, John, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's just around the change in locations. I think lots of organisations, once you actually get office accommodation or premises, it's very easy to become building centric and actually lose sight of the engagement with some of the people that we want to do. I think the one thing that working online has shown is actually we can engage anywhere, anytime, in any location. And I think we need to use the same thinking when it comes to physical meeting ups with people. We no longer need to be concentrating on one or two places in county areas. So that's the principle on that. The other side effect, though, potentially, is those organisations that have accommodation which they rent out to partner organisations, is the potential impact as people decide to use that new modelling of working, and the local coffee shops, community buildings, libraries, etc., become more flexible space. So you use the space as required rather than always put in the same location for everything that's going to be happening. Yeah, and we're seeing that, we're in the main, obviously, a residential landlord, but we are a commercial landlord as well, and we are seeing that there is significant pressure on our commercial tenants as their businesses are having to change radically or even be closed right now. So I think it'll be interesting, I think, for the WCVA to see how what support can be offered around the financial impact of wanting to work differently, and that we're not, we could well be, lots of organisations could have tied themselves into some fairly lengthy leases on buildings that they no longer feel they need. How are we going to be able to deal with that? What flexibility perhaps could Welsh Government help with around some of those lease negotiations? I don't know. That's just something perhaps we want to think about in the future. Sally, do you want to give me a hand? Anyone else that wanted to come in?
I wanted to bring in Helen. Lynn Cadwallader, because she's talking about collaboration. I think collaboration, working together, working co-productively, and Noreen's already posted something previously, is going to be really important moving forward. So I don't know whether Lynn wants to comment, and then David as well. Referencing the third sector. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, it's Lynn Cadwallader from Chief Executive of One Voice Wales. Yeah, I think one of the things we've really picked up on within the community and town council sector is the scale of collaboration that's occurred over a relatively short space of time. And I must admit that it's been a sort of cultural challenge, I suppose, for community and town councils over the years to work in partnership. A lot of their activity has been very much within the bounds of their own organisation. So out of COVID, I think we've actually found that some new collaborations have occurred, some positive collaborations have occurred, but the big challenge, which I've literally I came in a bit late, so but one of the big challenges that we found as well, and I've heard other people say, is around the whole digital agenda, because community and town councils up until the 22nd of April legally weren't able to work remotely. So that's changed on a temporary basis until May next year. And I certainly think that moving forward, we'll certainly be lobbying for that to be probably extended beyond that period, so that these useful collaborations can continue beyond that date.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Lynn, because, if you'd asked before to say, well, look, come actually, as a modern dynamic community council, we've got people who are busy, they maybe work away for part of the week, or they're maybe, why can't we work remotely? I suppose it would have been said, oh, well, we've always done it this way, or people won't like it. But actually what this pandemic has proven is that we can actually do things very differently, very quickly, if we have to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there was, in fairness, we worked very closely with colleagues in Welsh Government, and they did an absolutely fantastic job over a very short space of time in turning around regulations to enable councils to work remotely. But the one thing that they recognised was actually how archaic some of the legislation relating to the sector actually was, and it does, or it did, hold back the sector in terms of how we could operate with others.
Yeah, I mean, I often use the example, if I'd have asked my head of finance to run payroll from her laptop from home 2 or 3 months ago, she'd have laughed in my face and said, never, it can't be done. Yeah. But it has been done, everybody has been paid, we have been able to run payroll from home. So it does kind of makes you think, oh, wow, okay, this is proper game-changing stuff. We can deliver things differently, and in some ways that's exciting, but it's also quite nerve-wracking as well, but in that you're pulling away some of that comfort of being in the office, having your 2 screens, but it's both thrilling and terrifying in equal measure, I think, isn't it?
I mean, I think for the community and town council sector, I think this really is a paradigm shift. I mean, we as a representative body and a support body to the community and town council sector are really going to be driving a digitalisation agenda over the coming months. And in fact, this morning I've had a team meeting with my colleagues, and that's certainly one of the areas that all my team members have identified as being an issue on the one hand, but also a positive area as well, because it has forced the hand of councils to move in a totally different direction.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Sorry, Helen, to interrupt. I don't know whether Vina would like to come in, because she's a community councillor as well. And Joe, we've missed Joe Whitfield, and then I think there's David, and then Malcolm. We've only got about 10 minutes, so I don't know whether we can keep those.
Okay, so we'll go finish with those. So it was Vina, Joe, David, and Malcolm. Okay, so Vina, did you want to come in?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Very quickly, I've kind of put it in the comments. One of the things that we struggled with once the provision came on board to allow virtual meetings was making sure that all our members could participate in the same way. So finding a platform and bearing in mind the capacity and what resources some members may have in their own homes. That was a challenge as well. And trying to work through that remotely to get all members on board. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. No, thanks, Vina. That's really helpful. Thank you. Joe Whitfield, I think you wanted to come in.
No, I think I spoke earlier. Well, no, I did speak earlier. I know I spoke earlier. I did just clarify that I did put a comment up to clarify what I was talking about, our demand and support session. So it's Joe from Beat. So our demand is now 50% higher than in February, and support sessions delivered is 45% higher than in February. So I was just putting that up to clarify.
Thanks. No, thanks, Joe. Yes, it sounds like you're doing a great job in incredibly difficult circumstances. So amazing. I think David was going to come in. David Smith, or
I just spotted his comment. I didn't know whether he wanted to. Oh.
If not, I know Malcolm Scott had put.
There's Malcolm then, who's put his hand up.
David. Okay, hi David.
Hi, I'm very happy to just put my comments in the chat box them to be noted. What I think is really important is that we recognise that there's going to be subsequent waves of COVID-19, and there are going to be future unknowns and pandemics. So I place a lot of emphasis on us being prepared for that sort of future and ensuring that we've got really good public health infrastructure in place. So at the moment, I think there are questions being raised about Public Health Wales and its effectiveness, its accountability, and whether they're really fit for purpose, frankly. So public health, I think, is a really crucial issue around prevention and how we actually interface with prevention in highlighting the relevance of the third sector. So we're not just into this from a grant seeking or begging bold perspective, but we are really trying to shape the future in a way that hasn't been possible previously.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that's really helpful, David. And I think that's going to be part of that big conversation with government, isn't it, about the impact and the role of the third sector, the voluntary sector, in shaping the future, really, because we've got to move to a prevention agenda. I know the voluntary sector has been saying for donkey's years that actually investment in prevention is the way forward, because that means we stop lots of the problems, the very expensive to solve problems materialising in the first place. So hopefully maybe that message will hit home a little bit harder.
Can I just add that there seems to be an assumption in everything I actually read, and I've been tracking this quite carefully, that we can assume that people actually have food in the home. And if you look at the Wellbeing Future Generations Act and the guidance there, that's quite implicit, that food is like a given. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. So that's one of the reasons why in the chat box we've just flagged up the need for some kind of national food service, because there's loads of varied activity happening across Wales. And it's a question of how we start bringing all that together in a coherent way. So there's a national sort of coherence, but there's localism really strong and active.
Yeah, no, I think that, again, really well made point, and I think you're absolutely right to point it out. There's the vast majority of people will have been thinking, well, school is for education purposes, but the reality is school is so much more than that, isn't it? It's actually, in some cases, the only meal, a hot or a decent meal a child will get in a day. So the access to food, safe homes, shelter is something we just can't be taking for granted. Malcolm Scott, did you want to come in? Otherwise, I'm probably going to have to draw it to a close, I think.
Hi. Just quickly, I have made a few points in the chat box, but just following up quickly on something that I don't think has been touched on really that much here is the issue about getting our premises ready for starting back up again and the resources around it.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be, for the smaller charities, it's going to be a big issue of the cost and things of getting these things sort of in place and how to do it, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think many small charities operate in almost shoebox size offices. How do you social distance in a shoebox? It's not going to be easy, is it? So there are some real practical challenges, and I think I know somebody, I think it was Ben in the chat, had put about whether or not people are finding actually missing the importance of social interaction in the office. So that, okay, it's all well and good to say, well, actually, we don't need to return to work. But I know I certainly miss the informal conversations, the coffee conversations, the kind of wandering around, what did you get up to on the weekend? So that the value and importance of our human interactions with each other, I think we mustn't forget. I think I'm going to have to sum up because we've got 5 minutes to go. I tried to kind of capture some of the salient points, but I think pretty much every point everybody has made has been really valuable, and I think the breadth of what we've covered in this hour just demonstrates how far-reaching the issues presented by the pandemic are, in that very few parts of our businesses remain untouched by this. Some of the positives, I'm really, really pleased that as a sector, there's lots of focus on the positives here. So I think collaboration we're feeling is going up, and that we must capture that momentum and capitalise on that momentum, keep it going. There's been the rug has been pulled from under some of the traditional ways of doing things, and the easy to roll out excuse of, well, we've always done it that way, so we always have to do it that way. That the rug's been pulled, so that will help us frees us up to be radical. And I think there's a real challenge to the sector to continue to be as radical as we possibly can to to make sure we can think differently and do things differently. And I think somebody mentioned a paradigm shift, and again I think that's a really good way of putting it. It's absolutely shifted our thinking and our ways of working. Good point towards the end there on real big ask to government around focus on the prevention agenda, but not forgetting the fact that there will need to be some investment in the sector if we're able to just put some of the practical measures in place to continue delivering services that we need to be doing now. So hopefully some short-term acknowledgement that there is a need for that funding now, particularly as the lockdown may ease up. I think someone said something to me ages ago that actually this is us really realising that work is something we do, not somewhere we go. So I think, again, real people starting to think differently about what the future holds. And as much as I said before, recognise that it's been an absolutely torrid and awful time for so many people. I think we've really now got to focus on the positives that we can take and build a future of the voluntary sector that is going to make a real and ongoing and lasting difference to people's lives. So can I thank you all for your participation? I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's quite stressful chairing a session when you can't really see people, and I'm really sorry if anybody had their hand up and I didn't come to you. The chat has been awesome as well. I look forward to review that. And I just want to say, as a board member of the WCVA, as always, I'm absolutely blown away by the sector, how people in the sector have responded. It's quite humbling to see. So I think you should all be extremely proud of yourselves. And I am very grateful that the voluntary sector has, as always, stepped up and is making a huge difference to people's lives across Wales and beyond. So thank you. So I think I hand back to Anna or Sally.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Just to close, yeah, thanks everybody for participating. It's been a really rich conversation and chat there. We'll be collating this and feeding it back to you, make it available. There'll be a blog next week, but also a report that comes back that we'll be sharing with Welsh Government and funders and others as well. Next week we'll be having, by popular demand, influencing policy, and that's came out of the last Twitter poll, and now we've got one more day left for the current Twitter poll to set the sessions for the last two events. So please do have a look at hashtag ddyfodol gwahanol Cymru or hashtag different futures Wales to have your vote, and also please do use the hashtag to continue the conversation afterwards. So with that, a big thank you to Sally and the WCVA team who supported this, of course to Helen who's done a brilliant job chairing, thank you, and obviously most of all to everybody who's participated in the session. So thanks very much, and hopefully see others in future sessions.
Thank you. Thanks everybody. Stay safe. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.